Well, anyway, it's my privilege this morning as we enter into the second part of our service, Why Do I Feel Like This? And last week, if you were here, you know we had Trish Paul's registered psychotherapist who was here with us and answered some really important questions. And I don't know about you, but I actually walked away with some really tangible principles and a lot of help on how to navigate all that is happening in our world right now and why many of us are feeling the way we're feeling. So we have a very special guest with us as part 2 of our series of Why Do I Feel Like This? And I want to invite Drew Fest to come up. Come on up, Drew. As Drew is coming up, I'm going to do kind of a really quick introduction of him. Drew Fest is the lead pastor of Praxis Community Church, which actually meets here right now for the time being. But we'll get to that in a minute. But come on, have a seat.
Great, thanks.
Welcome for being here. Yeah, real
hey
privilege.
Everybody.
Yeah,
it's good to see you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Now, I'm going to get something right out of the way. Some of you are sitting there going, oh, we got a pastor? you know. Hopefully nobody's saying that. But you're in a really unique situation.
Yeah.
You're not just a pastor, but you have been studying to become a psychotherapist.
Yeah.
So you have this, I think, this dual insight, being a pastor and then dealing with the whole mental health psychotherapy component. So we're going to have a really interesting conversation.
Yeah. I'm excited.
Yeah. Did you want to expand on that?
Sure, yeah. No, first of all, I just got to say before we jump in, just how thankful we are. So Praxis is a church plant that started 10 years ago. And we're in such a unique space. Everybody is because of COVID. But we don't have a building or an office. So when a global pandemic hits, there's some good things about that. We're fairly fluid. We've been a fairly fluid community, sojourning, as I say, from place to place over the last decade. And then at Easter time, we were just really sensing that we wanted to start to regather. And just so thankful for your team here, Pastor John and the team and the elders here. Really quickly opening up your space to us on Sunday evenings and giving us a little bit of a space for just our core folk to come together and worship together. So we've been in this, it kind of feels like home a little, just being here, and honestly, almost like turnkey. So thankful. I know our team is very thankful. So it's great to be here to say that. I just live up the road. This is my hood, okay? I just live up the road in Byron. So this has been great just to kind of be in my neighborhood and so be thinking about us. This is a weird time, obviously, and then all the other dynamics for sure as far as gathering spaces and all that. Just be thinking about us. But we're just, again, so thankful. As far as the psychotherapy side, so in January 2020, I began a program in a Master's of Counseling. And just really before that, thought I would go the direction of Pastor John. I thought I was going to get a doctorate in theology, maybe do a PhD in theology. And was just wrestling through that, what that would mean. Obviously, it's beautiful. There's lots of things and opportunities that come from that. But I got around some folk in my own world and in the city here that were psychotherapists or started to kind of get me thinking about just a budding interest in psychology and in particular in psychotherapy and just the need for that. And so instead of doing the PhD route or the doctoral route, went into this program and honestly, I look back, I don't think I could have done it without COVID. Church stuff ramped right up. And any pastor will tell you, the move to online and Easter 2020, trying to get everything ready, and all of that was just crazy. But I have kids, we have 4 kids. A lot of them are obviously all of them are very active. And when everything kind of shut down, it was an opportunity to engage in this. Here we are at the end of coursework and this fall entering into a practicum at a counseling service here in the city at a private practice. And it's been a whirlwind of 20 months, but it's been one of the best journeys of my life for sure.
You're actually starting the practice this week.
This week.
It's
like your kids are going back to school Tuesday. I'm sweating under my arms too, so it's all good. I'm nervous. It's obviously being in the pastoral vocation for almost 20 years. This is a new world for me, so
yeah. So this is timing for you to be here and to answer a whole bunch of questions, especially as you're segueing into this whole new life for you. That's really cool. So how has the pandemic affected your church? And are you seeing the rise in mental health issues in your church and things like that?
Well, I think we were at an interesting point before COVID. I think as a reflection of the greater culture and world around us, I think some people in our community have thrived in this. It's obviously been harder for others. Obviously, the disorientation of being isolated affects us all on different levels. And the running joke is, like at first, even with our own building and gathering, the lady who did our booking, you think it's going to be 2 weeks, and here we are. Oh, for sure it'll be by Easter, and then by the long weekend, and then it's like, which long weekend? Here we are in 2021. I would say, being a younger community, there's definitely, it's taken a toll on people's mental health. I think as a reflection of the culture, there are some people that have thrived through this and have been resilient. There's others, and it's not categorizing people, it's more just, I think the collective story that we're in it's been difficult, it's been hard. It's been obviously a lonely season for some, especially those maybe that are living on their own, or are in seasons, maybe you're empty nesters, or wherever you're on in that journey. I would be careful to broad swoop everything as negative, but at the same time, definitely it's been a difficult season. In our case, our church is pretty much like 90% under the age of 40, and I would say in and through that, people have responded in different ways. We've been fortunate, I think, in the Western world to be able to, many of us work from home and have those opportunities where it hasn't tipped us over as it has in some places in the world, but I think mental health is a concern. Spiritual health is a concern in this, especially when you think church is like a gathering of people together. And when you're told you can't do that, or you have to do that in a Zoom room or whatever, it can be difficult.
Yeah. I've actually had families tell me they will not admit that it's been good for their family because they feel guilty telling people that.
Sure. Well, and introverts, so at the end of the day, so my wife, she's not here this morning, but she's she's just annoying, like life of the party. You know what I'm talking about? That person that is just like highly extroverted and in a highly extroverted kind of world. I'm more introvert. I like at the end of the day reading books by dead guys in a quiet room. So for some of us at the beginning of this, if you're an introvert, you're like, come on, right? Like some quiet, and I can study and I can do these things. So that's why I say I'm always careful to broad brush everything. Are there destructive things that have happened from the season? Absolutely. And time will tell on some of those things as well. So,
Yeah, I want to read a passage from Psalm 31 as we, start talking about, some of the specifics that are happening during COVID. But David writes, "Have mercy on me, O Lord, for I am in distress. Tears blur my eyes. My body and soul are withering away. I am dying from grief. My years are shortened by sadness." I think one of the things is that I've witnessed, from my pastoral vantage point, that people are grieving more. Would you see that?
Yeah. And I even think what I just shared there about not knowing the future, and here we are in 2021 on Labor Day and doing things we never thought we'd be doing. I think there's there's a collective grief that is happening, and I think that's happening in different ways for different people. But I would say even through this, we have to be honest, in the West, we've lived pretty calculated. I think you can probably nod your head to that. Like, you grow up, in most of us in middle class environments, and you kind of know the future. And so many of us are planned and scheduled, and we've had our lives, our 10-year plan. Some of you in your businesses, you have your 5 or 10-year strategic plan, and here you are. And I think part of the grief has just been in a culture that's been pretty much in control of our own lives. A lot of that is tied up into just the unknown. I won't use the word unprecedented, but I just did there, right? We all roll our eyes. But the grieving in a way that I don't think we thought we'd ever have to grieve, for sure, not knowing the future.
Yeah, because I think we have been able to control, the next season of our lives to some degree and be able to plan it out. And all of that got disrupted because I remember even as staff, we would sit, every Tuesday, we'd have our staff debriefs, and it's like, okay, what's going to happen this week? We can't predict what's going to happen Sunday. Is the government going to close us down? Is we going to have, other restrictions? All of that kind of stuff. And I can't recall in the over 20 years that I've been in ministry where it was like literally throwing the dice every week on what we're going to do for that next Sunday coming up.
Right.
And that was really a difficult time to navigate. And also, I realized that grief was really a big component to this pandemic when I started seeing all the anger.
Yeah.
Like, I thought that was a clear expression of the grief that people were experiencing. I'm no longer in control. I'm no longer having, any ability to be able to say, I'm going to live my life, and this is the way I get to decide. And I just think that was a reaction by many people, is a sense of anger.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think, listen, I think it was bubbling probably before, and that's where this whole thing is hit, which is, it's just a fascinating, really, if it's culturally, it's fascinating, because I think with some of the election cycles, and then social media too, to tell everybody to stay home but have devices in your hands, where I was thinking, and I'm for social media in the sense I try and curate and use it effectively, but it's fascinating how, even 20 years ago, if you had like an idea, the way to get that idea out is you literally had to go through the process of either blogging was kind of on the scene then, but publishing a book. Like if you wanted ideas out in the general public, you had to go through the process of, putting those ideas and getting that published, or obviously getting it out through those means. So it's interesting right now, the heated moment we're in, and how that is obviously exemplified with devices in our hands, where I don't have to publish. I could snap a photo of us and put some comments in right now and put it out to the world. Yeah. So it is an interesting time. I think you put into that, and that has deep effects on our mental health. There's lots of, even through studying, lots of peer-reviewed stuff talking about, especially for our children, like the comparison generation that they're growing up in. But now it seems like there's been an acceleration in some good ways, like with media. Like I think of our churches, that now the message has been out more than ever, which is beautiful. But at the same time, yeah, do I see that? Absolutely, yes. Yeah. I think it was boiling, and then to put everybody home, and we base in the West our ideas off freedom. It's hard sometimes when you feel like those freedoms are taken away, and what that means, and you combine that with easy access to opinion. Here we are.
Yeah, here we are. I think one of the things that I realized with social media very soon into all of this, how many people, and it was kind of a personal joke. I said, I didn't realize there were that many people who were already on the edge that got pushed over.
For sure. And that's what I mean. I think that's probably for our, not just mental health, but our overall health, that it was boiling, and it's been pushed in, obviously, to that.
Yeah. And if there is a positive side to all of this, is I think there's now a greater awareness of how it has affected us. And I think that's one of the reasons we're even having this dialogue right now, is to help people have an awareness of what is influencing the way they feel right now. And social media, I don't know. It's I know I get depressed every time I go on Facebook. It's just a natural thing for me.
The comment section.
The comment,
I'm just joking.
The comments. Some of the comments are just, people are angry,
and
people are frustrated, and people want some kind of change, and they want some kind of control back in their lives, and we're seeing that more and more all the time. And yet, right now, I'm not sure we have a very clear timeline as to when anything is going to get back to what we were used to before.
Yeah.
I think we're caught in a loop right now.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So I think just to recognize that we're caught in a loop is going to help us to say, well, then I need to do something more intentional about how I'm going to navigate the days and the months that are ahead.
Yeah.
You got any suggestions about managing the grief and managing the anger? Anything?
Those are great questions. I think, well, I certainly think being a part of a community is helpful. I know, obviously, we're restricted in some ways. And I know, like, as I think about, like, the church's role, and this is the beautiful thing, kind of the seat that I sit, I see these two worlds working together. I think a general vulnerability, and I think we're at a place now where that's been developing and growing, especially in culture the last bunch of years. But I do think the church needs to be a place where we can bring our grief. Like, even to read the psalm that you just read there, like, I often think about even our own community, how much opportunity and space is there for lament and grief. I think actually in the future for our churches, it's going to be important to create space for that.
Yeah.
In and through this. And then, like I sit in the other chair too, where I've seen some amazing evidence-based therapies. And this is not a thing to say everybody needs to go to therapy by any means. But I've also seen the other side where we live in a world that has developed where there's some really beautiful things we all can enter into as far as caring for that. So what I love about, if you're a follower of Jesus, we have these disciplines where I think we bring our grief to God. Hopefully we do that corporately, but I think of prayer and the rhythm of prayer and scripture and meditating on the scriptures, and then I think of this other world as well, that there's lots of help available, more so than ever. And to the point where you're doing a series like this, where I think a lot of, if we were to rewind the clock, we probably wouldn't be talking as vulnerable about these things a decade ago. So, yeah.
It's a little bit self-serving in the sense that I realized I was personally struggling in a really bad way.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought to myself as I was planning our sermon calendar because I plan a year in advance. You talk about, I plan a year in advance. So I say, if I'm struggling in this way, there's got to be other people struggling with the same things that I'm struggling with.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Can I just stop and just say, too, again, the beautiful thing is we live in I think as Jesus followers, we live in the duality of this. Like, again, we have community, we have the beauty of the scriptures, we have these disciplines, we have the Jesus way, which immerses our lives. I love that. And then we also have, again, things, I think, externally that can help. I think as a Jesus follower, we're in the best space to cultivate and care for that. It's unfortunate that the church sometimes has been known, and that you're a beautiful community here, but I think as a whole, sometimes the church has been known as like not being vulnerable places. Yeah. And then you just read Paul's words. Like, you just read what he even comes to the communities that he's writing and just bringing himself. And the beautiful thing with the church is this is a holistic place. We bring our bodies, we bring our emotions, we bring our thoughts to community.
Community.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. No, those are great insights. Those are important insights because, the tension of community right now when we're having that inability. This is our largest physical gathering in almost 2 years, by the way. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's great. On a long weekend, too.
On a long weekend. And I'm thinking in my younger, more immature years, I would be saddened by how little, you know what I mean? Numbers became, and that's the beauty of this thing. Numbers have a whole different representation.
For sure.
Whole different representation, which I'm really love. Is it, here's the next question. Is it okay for us to be feeling the way we're feeling?
Yeah, you put this, as we were talking, you put this, and my first reaction to this is you can only feel what you feel, certainly, and that's beautiful, you bring your feelings, but then also, I also think being in this world, we have the ability to change our thoughts, to change our thinking and feelings and behavior. A lot of cognitive behavioral approaches to just therapy and life basically say that. We have the ability to change our behavior, to change our thoughts, and to change our thoughts to change our behavior. So I would say, again, just echoing what we were talking about earlier, I think we need to bring, the church should be a space where, yes, we bring these, we bring ourselves and we bring how we're feeling, but obviously we don't stay there. And so I hope that that's, as I think about this question, I think, yes, we do bring an element where we're not trying to put on a show or trying to cover up things that aren't real in our lives. But then also the beauty of, like, those things can be changed. And this was really the whole way of Jesus.
Yeah.
Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount, he uses this word in Matthew 7. I think he uses it like 8 or 9 times. It's the Greek word poieo. And this would be up your alley, I'm sure. Because you're Greek too, right?
Yeah.
So you just like, this is awesome. But my Greek is not great, but just, the translators in our Bibles translated to bear, to fashion, to do. And then Jesus, with this little parable he tells at the end of 2 people building their lives, he says, those that really practice my way build their lives on the rock. He gives a picture. There's 2 builders. They hear this exact same things. They hear all of Jesus' teaching, but one of them builds on the sand, one of them builds on the rock. And I just think, when we talk about feelings, I think we need to create spaces where we can bring our feelings, but that we also practice ourselves in the way of Jesus to thinking and feeling the way he does, if that makes sense. Yeah.
So there's a movement forward. It's okay there's a reason why you feel the way you do.
Yeah.
Let's understand that, and let's understand how Jesus can move you into a better space, if that's
and I think
fair.
In the beginning, this could spawn a different way, but there are there's been a lot of disorientation through COVID, even amongst young people and people leaving the church. This has kind of been an opportunity in our case and in any church community's case. And I think about it, again, I think there's got to be a place where we bring our feelings. You can't, in the beginning, I don't think, you bring how you're feeling, but I think also we're drawing and inviting people into a different kind of way of thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the renewing of our minds.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So this is affecting the way people experience church, and it's affecting people's commitment to the church. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to. You've sort of spoken to that, but as a church leader, there's kind of an elephant in the room that is happening right now. I don't know if you're feeling it or whatever, but if we're going to talk about when normal returns, okay, how do we reconcile and worship together with people who have demonstrated a whole different, and been on the opposite side of what COVID has been, okay? That's really tough because for some reason there's so much emotion attached to this. Like, for years there, all kinds of Christian leaders that, I didn't necessarily agree with.
Sure. But
we could learn something from them and have some kind of interaction with. But in this season, it's like if there isn't this wholesale agreement, it's almost can't even worship with you anymore. That's an ugly side of this. So, and this is the beautiful thing kind of on the pastoral side, like being able to engage in some of these discussions. I think we have to wrestle with the fact that the church is like really the one place that invites everybody to the table no matter where we sit in these issues. And it's hot right now. Politically, here we are in like a short sprint in an election cycle. People are asking me all the time my thoughts, and I quite honestly sometimes don't even know my own thoughts. But I think about the particular kind of moment we're in, and I think about the church being the one place that is not gathered on preference. So I'm a sports guy, love sports. I still play, I know it doesn't look like it, but I play a lot of hockey still. And baseball, I don't think I was there when we played you guys. Who won? Did you guys beat us? I'm sure you guys beat us. I'm sure you did, yeah. That's how it goes.
We're just the young guy, okay? So we just need to grow into ourselves a bit, so it's all good. But
I'm sure we do.
hey, honesty, I like it. But okay, so I think of those communities, very involved in the hockey community, and myself and my own kids, and that is basically around preference. The one thing the pandemic has done is it's affected, when it comes to ideology, it's affected two things deeply. It's affected families, right? So there's a lot of families that have been torn apart, especially between generations. It's been a very difficult season around ideology, around how we're approaching the pandemic. Even things that bled into us in 2020, like the U.S. election cycle, and ideas and thoughts, to some of the racial tensions we've seen across the world, and so forth. You know this. Families, but the church has experienced this too, because the church, and this is not metaphor in the New Testament, the church is a family. Paul saw the church as a family. So we should expect some of this tension, and yet when I'm involved with a sports community or a place that is solely based on interest, it's easy to bail, because it's easier to be involved, and it's easier to bail because I'm there for the interest. I'm there for hockey or soccer, whatever it is. Churches, all of us could say, yes, we're here under the name. But it's so different, because the church, Paul envisioned this, the church is always a place where we would disagree on certain things, especially when you're talking about things out there, like on the outside of the church. And that will bring tension, but the tension is going to be, is we're going to want to try now after COVID to continue to try and make things really monolithic. And I think there's a danger in that. And what I mean by that is we're going to try and create, well, okay, do you agree around this issue that is not really as much a church issue as it is a cultural issue? Or do you agree with this issue? And okay, we can be together. I think there's grave danger. I think the church needs to be represented by all sorts of political persuasions on the outside, and be a place where this is what set the world on fire. Like, if you read about the early church and why they went from this little sect group of, basically people thought of them as this little offshoot of Judaism, to changing the world the way they did. A guy named Ronnie Stark, I'm sure you've read, chronicles this. The way they spent their money, what they did with their bodies. But it was also carrying on Paul's mission that this group is unlike anything we've ever seen, because it's every nation, tribe, and tongue coming together under the empire. Often in secret, they were gathering together. And it wasn't their political affiliations and their ideas about things that were going on in culture that brought them together. I'm weary, even in my own case, we're just going to continue to be monolithic, and we're just going to attract the same type of people. The beauty of the church has always been that it's a multi-generational, multi-ideaed, and that would be a fear of mine moving forward, for sure.
Yeah, that's a fear of mine too, because the church isn't a place where it's the absence of conflict, it's the presence of reconciliation. Right? Despite our differences. Yeah, despite our differences. I've had people say to me, because we've adhered to government, but I've had people on the other side of say, we no longer feel welcome at the church just because we hold that stance. And I've just really been grieved that they would hear that, or that would be the implication, because I certainly don't want to stand at the door and say, you can't come in because you were like this. I just think that would be absolutely horrible.
And we could go on. It can be tricky and challenging when you're wanting to live at peace, with where we are, and it's very challenging. But my thing is, as we move through this, and there will be a day, I know we kind of roll our eyes where we're like, are we really going to move forward this? We may be living in a new world, but I do think the church has to be this representation of the world, that there's differences that come in, and the way we act and respond together is really putting the gospel on display. I say to our crew, I'm talking, I hope this is all right, but I say to our crew, we've had a year and a half now to get the message out. Like, more than ever, your social media feeds are filled with churches. It's beautiful. I have church. I went to a leadership school overseas. I have friends all over the world leading churches. It's wonderful to see. But what's going to be I think the call for the church as we get back to it in more of a, normal, whatever that looks like, is going to be a reflection to the world of differences but together. Nowhere else do you get this, by the way.
Yeah.
No, I can't, right? Are you with me? I don't know anywhere else. This is why the church is so punk rock.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always say it's more punk rock than it is Beyonce, because it's just, we're not mainstream, right? So.
Thank you for not saying country.
Yes, well,
Yes.
yeah. I have my thoughts there too, but.
Hey. I got inundated with country all this week. Sorry.
Yeah, there you
My
go.
apologies. Yeah.
No.
So there's a lot of spiritual warfare going on in all of this, okay? But I'm going to move to a question that almost seems to be ignored in the whole church world and anti-this and all of that kind of stuff. What about the sovereignty question? Like, if you're a Christian here today, why isn't the sovereignty question a major question? Like, was God shocked and surprised by the pandemic? Was he unprepared for the pandemic? Why is it that the people who are just, kind of spouting the anti-everything about this pandemic, it's almost like God's not even part of the equation?
Yeah.
So I'm a big proponent that, good times, bad times, God is always teaching us something during these seasons. And I think one of the important lessons, and thank you for Susan Jensen, if you're here, the whole empathy question, right? Is God teaching us a deeper sense of empathy because of what we're experiencing here? That's kind of like the way of Jesus that you talked about. Yeah. So for the sovereignty questions, do you have anything to add or?
No, I would have just affirmed that. I mean, you look up even in the dictionary, I think it's like the word sovereign is supreme leader. That's kind of the way it's, as far as like a sovereign leader. And I think, Jesus is king, but he also knows that his followers will be caught up in very adverse times. And I love the empathy, the growing in empathy. Not to be negative, one of the questions I have sometimes for the church over the last year and a bit is I hope we also, though, haven't missed an opportunity here. I just think about church communities before the pandemic. A lot of people were busy and running, and I even noticed this in my own world, 4 young kids, and there's lots going on. And then everything shut down. I hope we didn't miss an opportunity through this for repentance. And I know in many cases, it's easy for people and communities just to kind of check out. I hope we didn't miss an opportunity. I just think of what an opportunity, I know, through all the not so good stuff, to be able to slow down. I'm not, families aren't running to, soccer or youth sports on Sunday mornings, but there was this opportunity to really just, the shutdown gave us an opportunity to hopefully turn our hearts collectively. I think in some ways we've just got to think through the opportunity that was brought in the not so good things, if that makes sense. So I believe God's sovereign. I believe, just like the Joseph story, he can work some really challenging times for good. This is what we see with our brothers and sisters around the world. It seems like when things ramp up as far as challenges and persecution, and I am not comparing what our brothers and sisters are going around the world to, a global or a national shutdown. But I do think, I just hope we didn't miss the opportunity through this. It was an opportunity for us to really slow down, and maybe for many of us that was a good thing. And so yes, I say yes to the empathy piece. I say yes to God working through this. And that's why I'm excited as well about the future and the regathering of the church, because it's going to be different, but I wonder if it's going to be a place, I hate to use the word effectiveness, but a place where we're ready just to be a harbor for what we've experienced the last year and a half.
Yeah, I happen to think that that's what's going to happen, like in the days ahead, as this sort of kind of becomes more of a memory than a present reality.
Right.
That is what's going to separate the church. That's what's going to make the church thrive, or the churches that do thrive are the ones that are able to embrace everybody, bring in community, make people feel like this is a safe place.
Yeah.
Make people, realize that this is a place where, they're loved and cared for, and that they can grow in the midst of, a world where there's all these kinds of difficulties. And we embrace that, and embrace that in a beautiful way.
And is Jesus surprised? Like, Jesus is not surprised.
No.
But I also think sometimes we can think like, okay, God's going to pull all the, like, and I think about the future church, God's going to pull all of these strings. I actually think there's a large, like, as we're in covenant, as the church is walking with Jesus, there are some things on us. There really are. And I'm not talking about working our way towards some sort of salvation. I don't mean that at all. I just do think in the future, for our churches, it's going to take commitment and regathering, and God works in and through that. So when we talk about sovereignty, sometimes we can talk about it in light of like, well, God just after this is going to just do what he does. Well, yes and no. Like, it takes me and my family and our community and this community participating, and as again, we talk about normal things coming back to normal. We really play our part in that. And the one danger with being not able to do certain things that are fundamental to being a follower of Jesus is rhythm and commitment are a big part of that. Yeah. I think God really, you see it in Acts, especially with the church in Antioch. I think it's Paul and Barnabas. God moved in and amongst their desire for the scriptures, their daily disciplines, and then they went out from there, and the whole Gentile world began to experience the gospel. And I don't think it was like God pulling strings. I think these people were living under his rule. They were living under his reign. They were practicing the way of Jesus, and out from that, that's what changed the world. So when we talk about sovereignty, I'm always weary just to that sounds, put it all on God in the sense like I don't have to do anything. I think there's a big responsibility. There's going to be an awakening here and a responsibility in our end for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always intrigued in the book of Acts that in all the categorizations of what the church was doing, the term evangelism is never used.
Yeah.
Because it was such a natural byproduct of them living under the rule of Christ, that they just naturally went out and communicated the gospel to the world.
So good.
And powerful as it was. So if we see somebody struggling, what are some things that we could do to help them and be a part of?
The biggest thing, I think, and this has been my own journey, as somebody who gets up in front of people and talks often, is I think we just need a moment of listening. I think we just need to be people that listen. And some of you in this room are amazing at that. Others of us have to cultivate that deeper. I think listening is very, very important. The empathy piece and displaying and communicating and embodying empathy, I think, is a big part of that and listening. I think we're in a moment right now where people want to be listened to. My prayer is, God, make the church a place like that. Like our liturgy and our gatherings that last an hour are very, very important. The work of the people, like liturgeo, this picture of us coming together. But I also think what the gathered church offers us is an opportunity as well for these relationships and opportunities just to spawn off. And so I would encourage people to listen. I think we're at a place more so than ever where there's less shame around the struggle of mental health and mental health issues, which is beautiful. Pastor here this morning read David, right? David, the guy who wrote most of the Psalter, is like coming before God, just like completely broken. You hear Peter and Paul's words in the New Testament at times, especially Paul. I think we need to listen. I do think, again, and I know I've talked about the dual side of things, the church needs to harbor a place of discipline and practicing the disciplines together. And then I also think we're in a moment in time and place and space more than ever where if you need help, we want to make it available to you at a professional level. And one of my journeys for the future will be, because of kind of the dual role, is to, I know we're trying at a cultural level with certain ad campaigns and different things throughout the years to make mental health and the focus of that more accessible and helpful for people. But as somebody in the church, and as somebody who's been a kind of a practicing pastor, I want to further that even more. You know, I know sometimes it's easy just to say, well, what you need to do is pray and read your Bible more. Please hear me. I am all for that. I pray a lot. I read the scriptures daily. I'm all for that. But there may be things that we need beyond that. And I've just been in a world that has really, I've been a Christian in a very secular world, but I've also seen just the evidence-based things that can help. And so we need, at a collective level, to listen. But I also think if you're struggling in any way, there's more and more resources available. And there should be no shame around those things at all.
Okay, I've only got one more question.
The regular guy will be back next week, by the way.
No.
Or maybe not, actually.
No,
you got somebody
no.
else coming next. 2 weeks. Come back 2 weeks, the regular guy.
We actually next week have a medical doctor here, okay? I think it's a really great cross-section of dealing with this particular pandemic and how it's affecting all of us. But I could have gone another hour, to be honest. Sure. I really could have. I think there's a lot of very good, I want to thank you. But my last question to you is, what would you give as advice moving forward for someone who's struggling or someone who's just had enough? You know, I want this done and over with. And you know, what would you say?
Well, I think going back to what we were just talking about, my inclination as a follower of the way of Jesus is to say there's hope in Jesus. At the same time, I think if you're in this place and you're in that space, we empathize with the pain, with what you're feeling. And I think, again, my desire would be that the church could be a place that could harbor that. But I also think if you're in a place that seems like it's at the, kind of the end of your rope, first of all, I would say, please come and talk to us today. And I can't say enough, and I know maybe I'm just repeating myself. There is help available. And I don't want to just broad brush and say, you need to feel better. Not at all. But what if we could create places where we bring our brokenness? And I've just seen the last year and a bit, last couple of years, that there are things that can be put into practice that can help us with how we're thinking, how we're feeling. And we're holistic beings, and there are biopsychosocial things that we can be doing to cultivate better space for us to live, but as well. And I just look around this room, and it's just beautiful to be here. I would imagine there's as well people in this room that if you reach out to. I can't say it enough. I am glad coming into this that it's a day where there's less swept under the rug than maybe 10 or 15 years ago. Like even at a cultural level, there was a lot of exposing of we need conversations around this. We need to be vulnerable. And I think we echo that as the church, but as well we also come bearing the gospel that says Jesus is King, and He's inviting us into a life with Him, and that matters. That matters.
Yeah, humanity has experienced many seasons where life has been hard.
Yeah.
Life has been difficult. It's been unfair. Yeah. It's been cruel. It's been, you name all the different seasons that the church is going to. But if there's one unifying thing about the church, is that it's always, always been a place of hope.
Absolutely.
And it has been a very tough season.
Yeah.
A lot of people are struggling. A lot of people are in a place where they feel helpless. Yeah. And whenever we feel helpless, the next step is we start to feel hopeless.
That's right.
But the church has always been a place of hope.
Yeah.
And I just pray that through some of the conversation here today, there's somebody who's been either here or online has elevated a sense of hope in their own experience.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, I know we're running out of time, but And I know you would appreciate this. You know, one of the things we get is we're saved in Jesus and we're being saved. There will be a day Jesus is going to come and he is going to set up shop here. He is going to renew this world. So in Paul's language, it's always, you are saved, but you're being saved, and then you will be saved. And it's like, Paul, like, what are you? And that's what he's trying to communicate. You have been saved. You are every day being saved, and you will be saved. And I don't just want to make it super simplistic, but when we talk about our mental health and some of what we're going through, we are saved. We're daily cultivating being saved. But the hope of this message is that we will be saved. Every infliction on our mind, every negative thought, every thought that may seem deep and dark will be dealt with. Yeah. And so we want to live in a space of cultivating that now, and cultivating health now. But as a Christian and as a follower of Jesus and a pastor, we just continue to hold on to, like, Jesus is returning and we will be saved.
Yeah.
And that's what we hold on to.
Yeah, I love what, just to add to that, I love what Paul says, to give all things to Christ, but talks about the peace that passes all understanding. And I love the next part. It says, it will guard your heart and your mind.
So good.
So it's everything that inflicts the mind, everything that affects our emotional well-being, that we can have the peace in both those. I think it's a very holistic way that he's communicating that.
Yeah, and the tension is, you can go, okay, yeah, I get it, but I'm living in the present, and we have complete empathy to that. Yeah. But the Christian hope we continue to hold on to is everything we see around us is not as it will be. Yeah. And I don't think God's throwing out this world by any means. I think he's coming to renew and restore, and that is deep down to our minds, for sure.
Wonderful. Yeah. Well, Drew, thank you for being here. It's been a privilege and an honor, and I pray. I know people have been blessed by everything that they've heard today. Awesome. Thank you for being here. We are going to have one closing song, and then want to just thank you for being part of this service this morning. I'm just going to say a very quick prayer as we close this time and then have our final song. Lord, thank you for the way that you continue to speak through your servants, and thank you for Drew being here today. And thank you for the wisdom that he's imparted and his answers and the journey that you have taken him on and brought him to this place. And I just thank you that he has been able to bless so many people by the experience and the wisdom and the teachings that you have inculcated into his life. And Lord, I pray that someone, whether here in person or online, will have really been touched, and their lives have absolutely been transformed and inspired by this time today, this morning. So Lord, we commit these things into your care. We pray that your Spirit would apply them as he sees fit, and that, Lord, as we come together next week, we will again be inspired and encouraged by all that we hear. So we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.